Perfect. Well, I'm super excited that you have chosen to join us with this episode of Overall HR. And I'm super pumped for today's guest. We were blessed, or I say I was blessed at least from my angle with the opportunity to meet Ray on a project that we were both working on. And he has a really cool story and he is passionate in what he does in his approach. I could tell you more, but who better to tell you about himself than the man himself? So I will pass the mic to Ray to tell us about him and his background.
Okay, thanks, Chase. And yes, very blessed to have met you on a project and kind of keep going from there. So my name's Ray Resendez. I'm actually out of El Paso, Texas. A little about me. I grew up here. I left here in about 2002 to attend the military academy at West Point, where I was just integrated into a lot of just leadership and everything prepping us because it is post 9/11, getting ready for combat, right? So something that's completely separate from my family. We are service based. My dad was a firefighter growing up, but I wasn't integrated into the military. I did my time there as soon as I graduated. Outside of my officer schools, I went straight into combat. Eye opening to see what service was at a different level, especially at that unique time, right? I think that's where I learned a lot of people doing what you have to do regardless of what you wanted to do. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Because at the tail end, we had a lot of people that thought they were getting out of the Army. I joined, I was a brand new, fresh guy. And then they were told, hey, you're not getting out. I need you to go to combat for your fourth time. And I had a lot of those guys. So when you come in fresh and ready to go and thinking you're going to do what the movies do, and then you have a whole different dynamic as you get in, that was an extremely tough experience for a 25-year-old who's never led anything outside what I did at school.
Mm-hmm.
I did 2 tours, went to Missoula. When I got out, I had a little bit of experience in contracting towards the tail end. And I was blessed to meet my wife over at eHarmony. Crazy story. I was one of those guys that probably said, hey, I had this list of what I wanted before I got married. I met her Thanksgiving Day on eHarmony of all times, right? And we got married, no kidding, 4 months later on April 6th, shotgun wedding. Hey, let's do this. And I went from no kids, not married, to blessed with 2 because she had 2 right before me. Crazy stories. I mean, I think everything in our life has been a crazy story with me and her, complete opposites. And then we had 4 more throughout the years. So I got 6 kids total. Outside of the military, when I said it was time to stop deploying and being out training all the time, right at the time I was going to make major, a great, timeline. I'm 32 years old, ready to go. Military success. It wasn't there anymore, right? I started a food truck business, and I started it on the premise that my wife was an amazing realtor at the time. I was going to have a sweet transition, and literally 15 days later, she got in a pretty bad wreck. She's good now, but she wasn't able to continue being a realtor. Just wasn't there anymore. So we went from on top of the world within 15 days to you better have the best brisket in the world, tapping out savings, Roth IRA, whatever you were not supposed to do, I did to pay the bills, right?
Wow.
And that's where we kind of got into what I do with adaptability on my speeches, and we'll talk about that because I really had to be adaptable and not really quit the dream. Could I have gone back to another high-paying job? Absolutely. It was baby steps. From there, I was a contractor in the GS system that lasted about 6 months. I get too bored and antsy behind the computer. Went into contracting as a contractor where the money was better. And I realized, hey, man, I need 2 things: better education to understand what's going on in the business world, and then I need more money. So I had the GI Bill, and I said, heck yeah, I'll take that extra $1,500 a month to go to school. And then my mind was just blown because I went in people don't really realize this, extremely insecure because I went in with a bunch of VPs and CEOs of their own companies. It's the executive program. Like, hey, I run a food truck business. Like, what is that to them, right? But realizing who I am and kind of just integrating those skills I had in the military and just getting people to move, I was extremely successful in there because of the people around me. Realize who you are, what you're going to do. And that really got me into my roles in federal contracting to the point where I was a director of operations for a tribal company here locally with 4 subsidiaries under me. It sounds crazy. It's not as sexy as it sounds, but it really is because it's a tough situation to go into, and I had to learn. When my time was up there after 3.5 years, that's when I just started my own LLC because you realize that when you partner with other organizations, when you build organizations from scratch, or you get into a very high functioning or what you think is a high functioning organization, and you get down to the nitty gritty, it comes down to building your team, resilience, adaptability. But most importantly, on a role like that with 6 kids is what's my work-life balance, right? And people would say, hey, You can look online, you can look on Business Insider, and you got the top executives. Hey, that's BS. There's no work-life balance. You work till you, and I don't believe in that, because no matter what organization you are and what you're doing, if you're gone from one day to the next, that organization is going to move on.
Yep.
The people that
You're
don't
right.
move on are your family, your pets, whatever the case may be, because you just missed 10, 15 years of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to catch up and be like, how the heck are you, a cheerleader in high school? Where the hell was I the last 8 months, right? 8 years,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
So that's why I built my own. So people thought it's crazy. I had done it before with barbecue. I was working 20-hour days, and that's when I realized, hey, let's adjust it a little bit. So the barbecue LLC exists, but it's more fun for me. I do competitions and we sell merchandise, right? And that was our big revenue
Yeah.
generator on the t-shirts. But now with this, what I do is I have federal contracting expertise from where I was in my experience, not because I'm the smartest guy in the organization, but we help companies get ready for federal contracting. Or you're going to call us when we feel like all hope is down the drain and how do we fix this? I love problem solving, and I like finding the right, independent contractors or employees to help that for other organizations, and then team building, whether it's companies, organizations, which is our big push, anything national, but
Mm-hmm.
locally it's really with the school districts and the kids. And then I'm also blessed to be president of a nonprofit called the CRC, which is a halfway house for the state of Texas here in El Paso, where we're funneling about 25 kids across the state that are going to transition back out into the real world,
Okay.
by providing them first responders and anyone else that's willing to volunteer. I got business owners that maybe ran amok back in the day, and now they're the top realtors, whatever. And these kids
Yeah.
need to hear it because they need the male role models that they're lacking. Two, they need to understand that it doesn't matter about your tattoos, your past, and anything that you went through before. Just educate yourself and then know who the heck you are. So what type of service you can provide to get paid, right? So that's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit about me.
Okay. I love that. Well, and for our listeners, whenever you and I don't really remember how we met. So we were on this project, and we'll call the person, we won't name him by name, but he can be a bully in a positive way.
Yeah.
His perspective in terms of seeing the needs of someone or an entity, in this case, an organization, he sees it before the person even has the awareness or the entity has the awareness that they need it. And I was struggling in terms of seeing that picture, because it's hard whenever you're in the contractor role, because you also are not in the environment to actually pick up on the social norms. So I can remember having a conversation with you, and I immediately clicked with you, because I could sense that you are a no nonsense kind of person. You listen to the point, okay, I'll validate you in your feeling, but I'll validate you and let's move on. How can we create the experience of what is needed here? You own it. Which kind of segues into one, I can see that in your story, because a lot of those things I was not aware of. But you are a person that has high expectation, not just for yourself, but other people. And now we've heard your story. Obviously, we know that that mentality of having high expectations is not something that typically happens overnight. So, can you tell our listeners how you came, I guess, to that, um, not mental acceptance, but that internal set, like just, okay, this is my ideology of I own the experience and I have high expectations for my experience.
Stairs and say I was hurt. And my dad comes down and he's like, "What's going on?" Like, I was fake crying. Like, there's no in or out about it.
Yeah.
That's how hyped up I was. He's like, "You're hurt?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna be able to go out of town, Dad." And they were literally posturing this to be able to figure out how to pay for me to go. Like, it was gonna be a great opportunity. I never went, right?
Really?
And that 8 year old experience then transitioned to where the first time I got caught cheating in high school on this computer science program, right? And they handed out this code and we all did it. The top 22 kids, I was a straight A student, grabbed it because we didn't know how to figure out the mode median and whatever else we were doing. And I looked at my teacher and she was just crushed. And then you fast forward to any other mistake or anything that I've been kind of emotional about. And I had to be self aware of that. If you don't set your own expectations, you're not going to be where you want to be, right? So, what does
I
that
love
mean?
that.
You can give me a job description. I can give you a job description, but I'm at the mercy of you set the bare minimum expectations. And maybe that organization wasn't on top of their game when they said it and they said, this is what you got to do. You can do everything to a T. And the perception of that leader is going to be like, I think they're subpar because they just hit the bare minimum.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the normal world's telling you, hey, hit these goals and you're going to be successful. But what do you want to do, right? You want to do that the rest of your life? Do you want to go through? But when you set expectations that are higher because you know what you're capable of, you can look in the mirror and be like, well, you said generate this much revenue, but I can double that. Set it. You might actually hit it, right? So it is unheard of what I'm doing to other people, but that's why they say leadership is lonely AF, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone else is going to be caught up on your feelings. Now, the person you talked about in the organization, I will follow to the gates of hell. But when I first met that individual, I absolutely wouldn't. I was blocked off. I thought I was good. And honestly, I was in my feels until I saw the
Mm-hmm.
importance of black and white and understanding somebody's experience. Maybe they're not communicating it right, but if they already know what the end state is of what the organization is going for, you don't have time to waste when they come into an organization,
You're right.
right? So expectations have to be high, but they have to be set by yourself. And if you
Mm-hmm.
got it too quickly, and you can hear this across anyone that gives you a motivational speech, whatever, like you sold yourself short. And the next thing you know, you're going to be sitting in a rocking chair at age 75 and like, God dang it, I could have done this.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I hated it before. Failing was ugly. This is my first podcast. This is the scariest thing I ever did. Most people won't even know that, right?
Yeah.
You're like, how do you rehearse? And you're like, well, you got to go back to your faith and everything. But most importantly, set high expectations because David Goggins is amazing to listen to. But the one thing that always clicks in my head is he's like, hey, when I get up to the pearly gate, I want St. Peter to roll out this list of stuff of what I was supposed to do. And then I want that thing to keep going of what I actually did, right? And I think if you do that, whatever you're doing, barbecue food truck, consulting, all the piece, you're going to hit a million errors. But if you just keep setting high expectations, you're going to be like, oh man, I'm way above what I used to make. I'm happier with my life. I'm running my own business with 6 kids. And when I left the last job that was a high paying corporate, the last thing that clicked to me is like, that they said that really just set me over the top of just, this is what I'm going to do is you need to think about your family and how are you ever going to match the salary? Well, I'll figure it out. That's extremely
Mm-hmm.
high expectations because
Mm-hmm.
it is very high. And anyone else in that shoe would have been like, I want that. But it wasn't enough for me. And I was away from my family too much. Now I can work all night. I've hung out with my kids during the day. And guess what? I'm not as tired the next day because I can look them in the face and be like, man, that's cool that I get to take you to school now or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I love that, and it's interesting. Those that are in my life, I'm a wordsmith, and I ponder and think on things frequently because I say like I think that the essence of that is trying to always be progressing in terms of how you communicate. And just yesterday, I had a thought just come to me, and I was like, mistakes are a blessing, but they're a blessing because they're evidence of action. And with the right mindset, it promotes growth.
Yeah.
And that is spot on with what you're saying, too, in terms of growth, continuous improvement, and just never settling. And kind of segueing into my next question for you and seeking your perspective when it comes to success. And success looks different for everybody. But if you had to select one of these as a primary foundation of success, would you say it's outlook or results?
I think it's both. And that sounds weird to say, right? So set your goals based off what you know you can do, your organization can do, and set them high, but make sure they're realistic at first.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to see the results in between. It doesn't just happen, right? So if I set a goal up here and then I have those triggers or those dots on my timeline that I do a self assessment, right? You have to base that off results and data, like
Mm-hmm.
on certain aspects. What does the
You're
data
right.
say? It doesn't matter how you feel. I could feel amazing. I thought I was the barbecue king. Facebook, everything was popping. And then I came home and I was like, crap, that electric bill, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So did I make enough to pay myself payroll and everyone else? Absolutely not at the beginning. Did I set goals? Did I do a budget? Whatever the case. No, like everything you thought I was doing, I didn't because I got caught up on how I felt and how
Mm-hmm.
cool it was. And everyone's like, I love your brisket, but it wasn't paying the bills. And most importantly, it didn't free anything up for me. It was actually that first year kicks me in the gut because now what I know in business, thanks to the people that we've met with our mutual, is I should have just stayed focused on the prize, measuring my results based off data and goals. And
Mm-hmm.
then my outlook was amazing. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
make it. I'm going to make it. But when
Mm-hmm.
COVID hit, what did I do? Did I adapt? A little bit. Or did I find something else? I did both,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's both. And everyone has to take that in. It doesn't matter who you are, what you are. Like, definitely have an amazing outlook that it's going to work, but you can't just base it off blind faith. Like, literally set up systems and procedures that can help you measure.
Oh yeah. No, I'm going off script here, Ray. You said you were nervous about this podcast, so I guess I'm going to let you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I didn't send this question to you, but I'm curious to hear, you are a mindset person. I love like looking at the back of your books. I see Made to Stick, Traction, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that tells me a lot about a person.
Yeah.
In terms of how their perspective is shaped. But I was having a conversation, this podcast is about HR, and you spoke at a Disrupt HR event. So HR is in all context of operations.
Yeah.
If you work with people, you are an HR person. How do you feel like leaders have to adapt in terms of developing the traits we're talking about today, but also, I guess, being that motivator and encourager for employees on their team, and that you own the experience, you create it, and to be resilient.
So I think it depends on how you got to the leadership position. If it's a business that you built, we got one area to talk about. If it's a business you grew in to get to that leadership position, or maybe you just came as an outside entity, right? With all three of those, you have to adapt in order to reach your employees. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because everything changes. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't have Facebook the same way that they have it now. And now Facebook's outdated and it's TikTok and it's going into X, Y, and Z, right? And
Absolutely.
them having the extra technology, different experiences have shifted the way we should approach employees sometimes. Now, keep your mission and your vision statement, right? As the leader, you have to believe in it. But how are you communicating it to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have a 30-year-old, never been married, life is going to an end because they just had a breakup, you have to understand how that affects the mission as a leader. And
Mm-hmm.
then integrate that into your why, right? Hey, this is what we're doing as an organization. And I know you're having a rough day. So as a good leader, adjust how you're going to approach it. I'm going to give you some time, but I need you to be on top of your game tomorrow at 8 o'clock.
Yep.
If anything happens tonight, let me know. But tomorrow at 8 o'clock, I need you to just wash it away, go for a run, whatever, right? And if you
Mm-hmm.
can't do that, I need to find somebody to do the job, because we got to think of the organization, but most importantly, show that compassion. And then how do you communicate it? Because we can't be what we used to be frustrated with before, is when my parents would be like, well, back in my day, hell yeah. Like, my kids make fun of me because I'm like, in Iraq, it was 135 degrees. I had 50 pounds. And then I have to stop myself. I did that so that they never had to, unless they wanted
Mm-hmm.
to. I picked
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Mm-hmm.
if we're really good leaders to get where we're at, we pick that. But maybe that
Mm-hmm.
employee just wants to be a great data analyst the rest of their life because of anxiety, whatever, right? Or that's just how much
Mm-hmm.
fun they want. They don't want to be in charge. Understand that. Give them their left and right limits and let them strive in that piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Every leader has to adapt.
You're right.
If you don't, you're going to lose. And somebody's going to take your business. It might be good today, but that's why I love Jeff Bezos and I love reading so much. It's like, cool, they're celebrating this award, but he's not as excited outside that first night because he's thinking three-quarters of head is people are going to start taking that idea. How are
Mm-hmm.
we adapting? And you need your employees to adapt with you.
Absolutely. Well, and you said something there important, Ray, that kind of triggered a memory for me. And my intent here is not to make a pitch for HR individuals, because I think that a lot of times it gets lost in terms of, yeah, there are HR managers, there are HR directors, but in my opinion, coming from an HR person, good operators have a high aptitude or high HR competency. And for those leaders that are aware that they don't, that's okay. They could have a finance background. There are multiple aspects or functional areas of a business, IT, but even if they don't have that natural intrinsic ability to see things through an HR lens, that's where HR professionals can enter the picture
Yeah.
to help create that or allow for that perspective. And I was sharing an example. I think it segues right into what you were saying, or piggybacks off of your example about this generation, Gen Z. They're managed still by baby boomers, and by, what is the generation that's the baby boomers' children? I don't.
Great question.
I have no idea. I don't know, but you get it. Like that
Yeah.
next level, you're 40, 45 to like 65 individuals are in these high level leadership positions. And for example, like if I tell Ray, I need you to be at work at 9 o'clock, and Ray shows up at 9:10, it would be easy to go to that stereotype and say they're just late, they're sorry, they're poor time keepers or time management. But in all reality, the generation that is leading, they have the competency to understand ETA, traffic, and they have that experience by a matter of perspective to think through adequate times to leave. A Gen Zer, I just get in my car, plug in my phone, put in the address. They've not developed the critical thinking skills of the factors that go into even something as simple as arriving for work.
Yeah.
And so instead of creating them to be these terrible people, how do we leverage that and have that adequate perspective? But it's hard. It's so hard.
Yeah. And I think that's why you go into adaptability, right? Because maybe that person that's always 15 minutes late is generating the most revenue. Is how do I get the training to help them get integrated into this company culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
We skip through everything. We go straight to what they need to do operationally, which gets to the bottom line. But even in combat, if something bad happened, a wife left a soldier, whatever the case may be, and I'm going to the most important mission, I better adjust. Because that moment in their life has crushed everything. And now we have lost the ability to effectively shoot, move, and communicate, right? That's what we talk about on the maneuver world. But how do I integrate? How do I adjust? You're not going to do this today. I need you to be on the radio because I know you can still effectively do that until we get to the points. And in your organization, if they're always late, have we taught the time skills? Do we have the time to do it? If we don't, then we need to look at our system because that's what's going to make us different. Everyone else is going to say, you don't have the time, I'm just going to fire you. Everyone's replaceable. Guess what? How hard is it to hire people right now? So are they really replaceable? And then you got the ones that are just great and you're going to lose them because they can go make $30,000 more. But provide a system that's like, hey, did you know that if you put Google Maps on with traffic, you can click it, push start, and then say, oh man, it's saying I'm going to get there 40 minutes later than I'm supposed to. And then you teach them communications. Hey, looks like I'm going to be 40 minutes late. I'm going to take the alternate route, but at least you told me why you're late. And then if it's consistent, then you get into the counseling, the employee improvement. But talk them through the steps so that it clicks, baby steps. But if you don't have the time and you're just one of those organizations that's going to go, cool, it just wasn't meant to be. I fully agree that there's just some things you don't have time for on these organizations, but that's not me. So I'm not going to really help them out much.
Yep.
I like being outside the box. And it's only because that's what I did on the food trucks. That's what I do at the nonprofit. And that's what brings me happiness. And if it don't click, it don't click. I might touch 2 out of 10, but those 2 could cure cancer in 10 years. We don't know, right? But because we took the time to adjust.
Oh, yeah. Well, and Johnny Taylor, he's the CEO of SHRM, and he gave a speech at the National SHRM Conference, and he was talking about an HR professional is going to be forced to train this next wave of talent that comes in. And he didn't use those terms, but he said the exact same thing that you're saying, is that people really aren't replaceable. And that's a mindset. And I am aware that I am labeling by saying baby boomers. And it's not just baby boomers. We're all guilty of it in some way, shape, or form. But people aren't replaceable. And as HR professionals, business leaders, and thought partners is the term that I really prefer, is that how do we challenge or adapt into that mindset of, here's the person in front of me. How can I not only leverage their skill set to better advance the business, but how can I also be creative in communicating the expectation in a way that promotes them to own it? Like the example you gave was beautiful. The next question I have for you is sort of, it ties in perfect because it's in the context of working with people. People that work under you, on your team, with you as counterparts, but also those that are above you. What does resilience mean to you, or what do you suggest it means in the context of working with people on a team?
Do we understand the common goal and why we're doing what we're doing? I think it starts there because a lot of people say resilience is cliche, but when you're back against the wall, what do they say? When it's sink or swim, like there's no choice but to swim, right? And to do that with an organization is just the most amazing feeling ever. When you start with anybody, It's annoying at first. I mean, we do it in the military to a T. Crawl, walk, run. And then you
Yep.
hear the questions, why are we doing this again? Why are we doing this again? Why are we doing this again? And then you get out into combat and the worst possible situation happens. I don't even have to talk. They just start moving.
Yep.
And instead of being like, what am I going to do? Like, in our case studies, they like to show the captain that freaks out in Band of Brothers and he's crying and he doesn't want to go do anything. And then somebody steps up and just starts moving because they practice so much, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
cut that short 100%, but that's resilience. Is if I'm struggling to make money to pay the bills and I'm talking to bill collectors, I'm embarrassed that I can't buy a steak when my West Point buddies come in at the worst possible time of my life, but I keep moving because I love the smile I can see in my 11 and 12-year-old at the time. I love the fact that they'll never know what that feels like because now we've set the bar so high between our master's degrees with me and my wife, librarian, all the other pieces. I cannot stop. And that's not always constant. You can
Mm-hmm.
listen to some of my speeches. There was a day that I was done, period. Call it PTSD, call it bills, call it whatever. But I took one action to ask for help. One person answered the phone and I called the wrong stinking number, but she didn't hang up on me. And we talked all stinking night while she got the right number of a suicide hotline with a military veteran with a blended family. And when I asked her, what do you do? Well, she kind of told me she was scared to tell me, thinking I would hang up. She just sold stuff online. Resilience is about service. For some reason, whoever that beautiful lady in on the end didn't hang up and she talked to me all night long because she believed that if you serve people, she'll sell whatever TVs or whatever she's going to do at the right time. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
resilience is about that with your organization. And don't get so far removed when you're a leader, right? Is we do get bitter about the people showing up late. They don't do things right, but maybe they don't understand why the organization's operating properly. Why did you start the business? Right? I can tell you employees that weren't happy with me. I can tell you clients that have dropped me because they don't think I move fast enough, whatever the case may be. That's my
Mm-hmm.
fault. I didn't effectively communicate why I'm doing this. I didn't effectively communicate why we have to work late. So own it. Everyone else will tell you that, but you have to live it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
late, the lights are bad, whatever. But when you do that and things go wrong, resilience is just contagious.
Mm-hmm.
Oh crap, the boss didn't stop. Oh crap, the boss is on the line. Well, it's because we got to hit some targets in the next 3 days or payroll is going to be tough.
Yep.
And then they're like, well, this is a pain in the butt. But what are we doing? While we're going through it, let's make it the best environment that we can do. Order the pizzas, get the coffee, the monsters, the energy, whatever you need, and then do it together. Don't step out of the room when they're suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's uncomfortable, make sure it's uncomfortable for the organization as a whole, unless there's some mitigating circumstances. And if there are, communicate it, right? If I'm
Mm-hmm.
back at the house with my kids by 6 p.m., but I told the staff to stay there till 12, that's not resilience.
Right.
Resilience is I'm calling mama, hey, get an extra babysitter. I need to stay late with the team. And if you're doing it right, your spouse, your significant other, I don't care who, is going to understand that that's what you got to do. Because then that also builds on the resilience within the family and everything else. Everything's an organization that you can run, and you have to effectively communicate that. But resilience is not just like, hey, let's suck it up. It's what's the environment that we're doing it, and we're doing it together, but through our actions, not this.
Yeah. You're right. Well, and you know, I've heard you say this in our conversation today, but it's interesting to me. You reference standards and mission and vision. Um, so I'll ask you this question: is it possible to build resilience if an organization does not have those defined?
I think that it'll always exist, but it won't be possible as a team. Because
I
what you'll
agree.
find is a culture in an organization that doesn't have that, somebody's practicing it. It might be that poor soul in the operations room who's doing the job before because we don't have the money to pay. The HR member who's looking online while they got a million tasks with better jobs out there, but I can't quit this job because my wife needs this or I got
Mm-hmm.
surgery to pay for, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think resilience always exists. I just don't think we effectively listen and watch our employees properly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're not going to practice it as an organization. You want to know where it exists outside basic contracting. Hey, do I have my vision, mission, and everything talked about? Let's just see how many people stay. You know, let's see how many people stay when they say, "Hey, somebody else was offering me $10,000 more, and what are you going to do to match it?" I'm not. I don't have the right vision, mission statement because we should know and have a communication one way or another that bonuses are only offered on this time, and they're only offered if we hit these gates. And if you come to me asking for an extra 30K, every 2 months, like, good luck. I
Mm-hmm.
love you. I don't want to lose you, but don't hold me hostage because you're not thinking about the team.
Mm-hmm.
But if we think about the team, we'll all move up together. But that requires a system that is just top notch, right?
Right.
So
Right.
can you do that in a small business? Absolutely. But once you start making it, that's where everyone kind of loses it. My vision and mission statement wasn't adjusted. We had that 10 years ago. COVID just happened. You better have a strong one if you're in construction or whatever the case may be,
Mm-hmm. Well, I've not quite branched out into this space because my business is fairly new. But my passion in terms of HR is encouraging leadership groups to build cultural norms through policy, which is practice, of course. Your norms are your practice, rather than incentivizing people through procedure.
Yeah.
Because building a norm in your talent is so much more beneficial than enforcing a procedure with your people. A norm is reactionary, but it also gives people the space to be empowered to be themselves. But it also promotes consistency and makes you better. Whereas a procedure is so rigid, it's like if I tell Ray, do X, Y, or Z, or I can tell Ray, hey, this is part of the scope of your role. Can you just make sure it's done by this date? It's different.
Yeah.
It's very different. And one of the best cultures and organizations that I was ever a part of, it was easier because we opened. So the general manager at that time, he understood it. He understood strong teams, and he brought, it was a franchise. It was a Marriott, so they had distinct values and a mission statement. But he brought local operating procedures in terms of cultural guidelines.
Yeah.
And I operated the HR function. Our retention was great. Our scores were great. We were like top 10 in all of Marriott's in North America. We went to Colorado and won an award for select service out of 870 hotels.
Yeah.
And that was a really cool experience. But I was able to do that because I had backing with operators that understood the importance in having cultural guidelines.
Oh, 100%.
And the first one was no gossip. The fourth one was like, go to the source, resolve the problem. Have fun was one of them. It was promoting norms that made us a strong team that also fueled the outputs of those standard performance metrics that you hear about in a business.
Yeah.
So, all right, my friend. Well, I tell you, I really, I've appreciated our conversation today, and you have shed some light on a lot of these topics. And I love the fact that you use different vocabulary. I can tell you're an operator, but you have a high HR acumen.
Yeah.
And your story is beautiful. I know that you have impacted individuals in your life, and you're going to continue to do great work. And I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity to cross paths with you.
No, appreciate it. And I would say that it's funny that you talk about operations and going through is when I signed up for Disrupt HR, it wasn't because I thought I was a T at HR stuff, right? Especially based off my language and all kinds of stuff I had to work it out. My goal is to be some type of keynote motivational speaker at some point in my life. So that's why I signed up. I was like, hey, it's going to be hard. Maybe it's like a TED Talk. And when I got there, I felt extremely underqualified again. I was super nervous. I remember sitting watching 9 speakers go ahead of me with doctor's degrees and everything going down. But then I just felt this passion and this wave come through me. I was like, hey, they're not touching on something that I believe on strongly, right? And what does that mean to everyone HR out there, whether I'm an operator or not, is we're all business development, we're all human resource, and we're all operators. If you act like that and don't think about what your job description says and physically think about it, it's important for all of us to understand what you guys in the HR world know, and it makes your jobs easier. Compassion, rules and regulations, the proper hiring processes, all of that. Integrate that into everyone so you have 200 HR reps, and then we just have to go back to those directors, right? So don't ever feel like it's not your job. And most importantly, make sure you know that it's, no kidding, 100 things outside that job description. Because in HR, you guys keep us safe, you keep away the lawsuits, and you keep tailoring it. So keep going with it. But again, at the end of the day, we're all operators, we're all business development, we're all HR, and we're going to be able to build an organization. Whether the leadership's there or not, I don't care about the title. Just own it, right? And then keep rolling with it, and you'll see that you can really have a lot of impact. And it starts with those things you said, the no gossip, no everything. Just get out of your feels while it's work time, but bring those feels back in when you have to be compassionate and really work with those employees that are going through the worst time of their life. That's the only time it's there. but make sure you're thinking about the mission first. Integrate it into the mission, or just let them take some time off, whatever your rules and regulations allow within that organization, and let them do it without any judgment. And if they're taking advantage of it, that's on you to talk to them and work through it. And then you make the hard decisions, but make sure you at least gave it a shot, because that's how you're going to keep people in your organization.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Spot on. I couldn't have said it better myself. For those of you listening, please, I know Ray is on LinkedIn. Give him a follow. Listen to his Disrupt HR. That's on LinkedIn as well.
It is.
So Ray, we will drop, with your permission, just your LinkedIn handle for everyone to give you a follow, because the advice and insight you offer, again, is invaluable. And thank you for those that have taken time to give this episode a listen, like, share. Thanks for tuning in to Overall HR.